every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas, and in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Hi, everybody. We're back. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the Comic Book Conversation Show. John Suntress here. I will happily give a salute back to our guest today. Fabian Nicieza is here. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but among them, I want to get this up there. There it is. The new novel.
Right up front.
June 22nd. Absolutely. Suburban Dicks. Very cool. First novel, Fabian?
It is my debut novel. It is the first novel I completed, let's put it that way. And I got very lucky because it also was the first novel I sold, so worked out pretty well for me.
That's awesome, man. Here, I got the pull quote or the description. Andy Stern thought she solved her final homicide. Once a budding FBI profiler, she gave up her career to raise her 4, soon-to-be 5 children in West Windsor, New Jersey. But one day, between soccer games, recitals, and trips to the local pool, a very pregnant Andy pulls into a gas station and stumbles across a murder scene. An attendant has been killed, and the bumbling local cops are in way over their heads. Suddenly, Andy is obsessed with the case and back on the trail of a killer, this time with kids in tow. She soon crosses paths with disgraced local journalist Kenneth Lee, who also has everything to prove in solving the case. A string of unusual occurrences and eventually body parts surface around town, and Andy and Kenneth uncover simmering racial tensions and a decades-old conspiracy, such is the subject behind Suburban Dicks. Very cool, man.
Yes, and the entire original idea, from the title to the characters to the entire plot, was originally conceived in around 1995. So just another typical 90s comic book idea, right? So I had the idea to write about this woman who was pregnant with her 5th child, who should have been something that she's currently not. And the reporter as well. And the original template for the reporter character was actually me and my own insecurity, my own fear.
Oh, wow.
At that point in my life, I was in my very early 30s, and I accomplished, very surprisingly, what I'd always wished I would get to do in my life. And I felt like, what now, though? I mean, it's very rare and very lucky that you get to do what you wanted to do since you were a kid. But I was young enough to realize, what am I going to do next? So the 2 main characters in the book, both had tremendous impact and opportunity and success when they were much younger, both in college, actually, and have spent the last 10 years of their life, hitting their early 30s, feeling like that they don't know if they're going to get that opportunity again. And it's interesting because I was 34-ish, I think, or so when I came up with the original idea. And now that I finally wrote it in 2017, 2018, I had to really reposition my brain to remember what it was like when I was in my early 30s, and you have your first mortgage and your first kids start coming, and all your friends are getting married, all of that stuff. And because that's the position, the point the characters are in the book.
Understood. So yeah, your older perspective did this. I mean, has the story changed much coming back to it in recent years, or again, as you say, you've kind of had to rewire yourself, thinking like you were in your mid-30s? But
No,
yeah,
you know, it was interesting. That's a great question, because I don't ever really talk about my process, and I don't like to think too much about my process, just because I tend to think of myself as an incredibly flawed writer. So anytime I think about my process, I look at the flaws. And what it was me having 25 more years of experience was a benefit to the book and to the writing of the book, and understanding those characters better than I might have if I tried to write it when I was of that age. Because you look back on your life with experience, good and bad, and it helps color your understanding of what you might have been thinking or how you might have been acting when you were that age. You know, whether you're in your 30s writing a story about when you were in your teens, while I'm in my late 50s writing a story about people in their, you know, just turning 30 or in their early 30s, having kids, etc. And it gave me perspective to understand the things they're still going to face, the things they're still going to have to deal with moving forward. And I think that it helped in a lot of ways. It's interesting that, you know, a lot of people have asked me, like, it took you so long to write this. You say you've had the idea since '95. You didn't start writing it till 2017. You know, why did you wait so long is the question I get asked a lot. And I also get asked a lot, do you regret not having done it now that you've sold it, now that you're getting good reviews, now that it's a week away from coming out? Do you regret not having done it sooner? The reason I didn't do it is the reason I can't regret that I didn't do it sooner. And that reason is simply a combination of insecurity and not being satisfied with whatever I tried to do. So I have tried to write this book twice in the past. I have tried to write other prose in the past. I had 275 pages written of a Gambit novel in the early aughts for Byron Price Books. But they pulled the plug. Marvel pulled the plug on the licensing deal, so several books that were in the hopper all got canceled. And I haven't looked at it again since then, and I don't want to now. But I was making an effort to do that. The Gambit novel might have been the only time I was satisfied enough to feel confident to at least keep going. And that's probably just because it was a character in a universe and a story world that I knew and understood and was comfortable with. This was different. This was just a point in my life that happened where I just said, if I don't give it at least one more shot and try, then I'll regret not having tried to do it. I'm getting closer to retirement age than I am to worrying about career age, you know? So let me give it a shot. And I got support first from my boss, who's my wife, who said, you're going to spend a lot of the next year doing something that's not going to pay anything. Okay, let's go for it. And then I got support from other people who were reading it. Alex Segura read the first 3 chapters and gave me a thumbs up, said, keep going.
That's great.
A couple of my friends and coworkers read it and said, it's good enough. Keep going. So that gave me the impetus to go. And then it's probably somewhere between pages 75 and 100 of the original manuscript, I took a look at it and said, this isn't that horrible. This is, you know, and like quizzically, you know, like, is this not that horrible? And it wasn't that horrible. It was just under the bar of horrible that I should keep going. You know? And I did. It took a while. It took me well over a year to write it because it was never my full-time gig. I had paying work I had to do. I
kind of figured, sure.
Yeah, and I had a lot of loss in my life in 2018, and that derailed me a few times. Every few months, my mom died, my dog died, my dad died, all in a 6-7 month span.
Oh, that's horrible. I'm
gonna laugh about it now because now it's kind of funny. Back then it wasn't funny.
Sure.
But you know, other than the dog, my mom and my dad lived very long, healthy lives. So you know,
that's great.
They're in their 90s and late 80s, so they got through a chunk of the century, as it were. And it just throws you off a little bit. It's hard to it's hard to get you gotta muster the enthusiasm and the attention to just work on the paying work, much less the non-paying work.
It doesn't matter how old you are. Losing a parent is the worst. And
yeah.
I mean, I get it. So yeah, man, no, that sucks. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
I
Good
appreciate
to hear that
it.
good to hear they had good runs. That's excellent.
Yeah, the dog is the only one that didn't have a good run, and the dog was hard.
Sure,
I wasn't ready for that one. I always joke that I will never look at Deadpool 2, the movie, ever again, because the week it came out is the week I found out my dog had like 4 weeks to live. So I was like, oh, thank you know. So what I tend to say is, thanks for nothing, Ryan Reynolds. But by the time I finished it, I thought I had something. I wasn't sure. I knew that I still had a lot of work to do on it. And I hired an editor on Alex's recommendation. I hired an editor, a freelance editor, Claire Lamb, and she went through it and gave me great feedback. It was very positive about the book and the characters, but I had to cut a lot, and I knew I had to cut a lot because my lack of experience in writing prose was showing through in my repetition of information that the reader already knew, but the characters didn't know. It was a great writing lesson for me. After doing this for 35 years, it's a great writing lesson. When you're writing a novel, your readers often know something before your characters do. You can't repeat it or else they get bored. And that was happening constantly. So I just started to cut. I cut and cut. So the original manuscript went from like 540 pages or 570 pages, I don't know, all the way down to 450. And
wow, that's great.
That got me a chance to show it to an agent, and the agency UTA wanted to represent it, and I was that made me getting the agent is what really made me say I have a chance to sell this now. Someone seeing this who has experience in selling books and has contacts at all the major fiction houses, they're seeing something here that is sellable. And you know my history in comics, John.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of how I broke in and the nature of the kind of work I did early in my career, I've always equated for good or bad. Sales doesn't equal good. Sales equals success as far as the publisher goes, as far as the freelancer goes. If you sell it, you've succeeded. Its reception among the audience often is something you don't have control over. Sure. But once you've sold the work, then in a very perverse way, because of my upbringing, that creates meaning to it. You know, and I recognize the flaws in that. I totally do. But it's hard because it's been my DNA since I was 25, 26 years old and broke into comics. You know, I didn't have the opportunity to be on the outside trying to sell in. I was always on the inside selling out. And selling out literally, not just figuratively.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the perfect description of my career. I was on the inside selling out, and the agent, having Albert Lee at UTA, United Talent Agency, want to represent it. They came back with really good notes. I cut another 50 pages out of it, I think. Okay. So the manuscript went out at 400 pages, and that was November of 2019.
And then COVID, of course. And did COVID delay the release of the book?
No, the book was always scheduled from the time they bought it. When we had a few publishers who wanted to buy it, which was ridiculously fun, unexpected fun.
Yeah.
And when we went with Putnam, part of the reason was the editor who wanted to buy it is a really good editor with excellent cred and standing, and we knew that meant that he would, if he's supporting it internally, that means the all the gears will turn. Sales, marketing, publicity, all of that will turn if a major editor is involved in the book. You know.
Sure.
And the other reason is Putnam Publishing is the first company I worked for out of college. I worked at Putnam Berkeley for 2 years before I moved over to Marvel. So I like the symmetry of that. I like the idea of selling my first book to the company that I worked with. The executive editor, the vice president, executive editorial for I think for paperbacks, is a guy that I had worked with briefly when I used to be there back in the early 80s.
Sure.
So I like that symmetry, and so I did more tweaks to the editor Mark Tavani's notes, and the contract always had it scheduled for 2021, with no date set in the contract. but it was a 2-book contract, so they wanted to give me the year of 2020 to write my next one.
That's excellent. You answered my question in terms of, is this the start of a series or not? So that's,
we hope. It's not. Yeah. It is and it's not. I mean, it is in that the first 2 books are the same characters, story world, very different murder investigations. But it is the start of a series if it does well, and they want to do more, because then we need a contract to do more. Because right now I had a contract to do 2 books and I fulfilled that. So I'm certainly hoping, because I have several stories I'd like to tell with the characters. I have spin-off series that I would like to do with some of the characters. I've lived with these characters in my head for such a long time that I know their lives for the next 10, 15 years, not of my writing life, but of their living life. I know where they're going to be, and I know how the daughter grows up to be XYZ and the son grows up to be, because it's been festering inside my head for so long that I had a rough idea of where I wanted to take several of the characters. So I hope that I get to do more. I mean, I'm confident I will if it sells well. If it doesn't sell well, maybe they'll want to do a 3rd, because sometimes book series don't gain steam until a few books are out.
Sure.
So we'll see. Fingers crossed, because I'd like to do it. If it's a completely unexpected and completely thrilling way to think that I'd get to spend my 60s getting to write novels, for a major publisher. It's like, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if that's what's in store for me the year I turned 60, my answer would have been no.
No, but it's great too that and this has been a recurring subject on Word Balloon is people of your era. The pinnacle was Marvel, and as you said yourself, back when you were in your 30s, you're like, all right, I hit the mountaintop. Now what? And I can appreciate that. And also, I think now newer creators are coming in and are more cognizant of the idea of, let me build my audience at DC and Marvel, then let me do my own stuff and take my audience with me.
And they're very smart to do that.
Well, you're doing that now. And that's great. Seriously.
Yeah, but I'm also 60 and they're 36.
Yeah, but it's not. Go ahead. And then
I was at Marvel for 10 years on staff. And broke in as a writer while I was on staff, and had my greatest sales success while I was on staff.
Sure.
For me, the staff job breaking was more of a reason to leave Marvel when I did than my writing was. That time was very.
What was the staff job? What was the staff job back then?
I was Marvel's advertising manager for like 4.5 years, responsible for all the ads that they did, house ads, promo posters, giveaways at conventions, retail displays, all of that stuff. I did all of it. And then I was an editor at Marvel for about 3.5 years, and then for 1 year I was like a consultant / interdepartmental ombudsman, because that's when I was doing so much writing. They wanted me still in the office, but I couldn't be there every day. So I was going in like 2 days a week and interfacing with different departments. That was like 95, when everything was starting to fall apart. It was falling apart internally, but it was also falling apart for me with my writing. I came to the same exact realization that you were just talking about, using the company to make a name for yourself and then move on to do some of your own stuff, bounce back to the company, do something, go on to make your own stuff. I learned that the hard way after being there for 10 years and after writing everything I was writing, because the year I left, I basically quit almost all of my titles, or got fired from a couple, but I quit almost all my titles. And then I had almost no writing at all at one point. I did 8 issues of a Captain Marvel series, and I did a 4-issue Spider-Man miniseries, and then that was kind of it. And then I left, and that's when I took the job at Acclaim. And I took the job running Acclaim Publishing because I wanted the opportunity to run a company. I thought I was going to get that opportunity at Marvel, but when that wasn't going to happen, I decided I got to cut bait and get out of here. So I got out in a way while the getting was good. But after that, my entire life has always been the search for something different and hoping to have it be something that clicks super well. and it's always been in different fields. It hasn't been just comics. I've barely been a comic book writer for the last 10, 15 years, you know?
Sure. Yes.
So I take it to heart that for me, the exodus to find other opportunities wasn't necessarily in creator-owned comics or you know, even other writing for other comic book companies. For the most part, it's been searching for other platforms to develop my work on, you know. And a lot of that work was not just my writing work; it's my office work, my office ability, my management ability, my ability to interact and interface with creative talent, and have someone who can run the schedule, since I can't do that, you know, all that stuff, you know.
Sure. So what was happening between Acclaim and now in terms of these other platforms? Yeah, no, honestly, yeah. Well, no, I want to hear it and everything. And yeah, especially in other media or whatever. I mean, yeah.
I've worked for 20 years on a freelance basis with a company in Manhattan called Starlight Runner Entertainment. And we did, basically, if you really want to boil it down, because it's not easy to boil down, we did story world development for Hollywood studios, toy companies, video game companies. And then it started to expand into weird, interesting government work and work with work with a couple of universities and work with a Christian ministry charity, and just different kinds of story world development that expanded its way outside of fiction and into the fiction of branding. So we worked with Coca-Cola, we worked with Pepperidge Farm, you know, things like that. And then that same experience in understanding the narrative of branding worked its way into the ability to work with like a Curtin University in Perth, Australia, and work with them to try to improve aspects of their communication on campus to their students because they were having problems with some of their indigenous student cohort that was at the college. So it expanded into interesting, weird avenues, you know.
Cool.
And I was only there full-time-ish for a couple of years. It was almost always freelance basis, but I'd go into the office a couple of days a week because I like getting out of the house and going into Manhattan. And we worked on Hot Wheels, we worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, worked on James Cameron's Avatar, worked on Men in Black, worked on Sony Spider-Man, worked on Transformers, on Halo, you know, a lot of big-time properties. They've been doing work. I have not been that involved as much the last couple of years because the other stuff I was doing, but they've been really heavily involved in the Ultraman stuff that's been happening.
Wow.
All the Ultraman percolation of the last couple of years in the North America. That was a job we were doing, and they're still doing with Subaraya, the company from Japan.
Yes.
So the whole Marvel deal, all the new toy stuff that's coming out, all of that stuff is brand work they've been developing and doing. And it was fun. Cool. So some of the jobs sucked. Some of the jobs were fascinating as hell. No matter what the job was, it was always an interesting learning experience. It took me. I got to travel to different places. Got to be on set during the motion capture portion of Avatar, when all the actors are wearing mocap suits, and I'm on set for them doing that. I'm on set in Queens when Will Smith walks out of the dressing room wearing his Men in Black suit and just strides across the set, and you're like, wow, it's Will Smith in his Men in Black suit. Holy crap. So you get a lot of interesting perks and interesting opportunities as a result of that kind of work. I was chief creative officer and co-founder of a kids sports themed virtual world called Fungo Play. It was going to be like a kids sports version of Club Penguin is what it was going to be. And we got to beta stage, and we were close to launching. We had already run some national TV spots on Cartoon Network, and Apple announced the iPad. The minute the iPad was announced, our chief technical officer came into the office on a Monday and goes, "We're done." That was it. We were literally done because that iPad was going to destroy desktop publishing subscription models, and it did. It tanked the numbers for the biggest brands like World of Warcraft and Club Penguin. So we were never going to get a chance to get a foothold and build, and our numbers would never be able to work. So I did that for 3 years in an office and 2 years in prep work and raising money and all this other stuff with the co-founders. And I was the chief creative officer, so I ran the animation department and the studio guys.
Wow.
I hired James Fry, who's a comic book artist, to be my conceptual designer, and we created like 36 characters and like 7 story arenas, like sporting arenas and worlds the characters can move through. Again, phenomenally exciting, fun, interesting, new, different work. It never took off. It never got a chance to take off. But I got to produce 3 30-second commercials that aired nationally. I got to write them and produce them. So all of that just turns into good experience.
Absolutely
worthwhile experience.
That's cool. Where do you? I mean, so basically, this was an MMO. Am I right? Or in terms of
yes, it
storytelling and participation.
Yes. But the kids are the avatars. The player just gets to go wherever they want to go. They get to choose whatever they want to do.
Sure.
The games this is all aimed at kids. So this is like 6, 7, 8-year-olds. It's not aimed at 28-year-olds.
Right.
So the games were all short, quick games. And escalating abilities. But the key component of that, which was really fascinating, was that we wanted to take real world play and activity and let that become fuel for the kids to get more rewards online. Okay. So we were developing like a Frisbee that had a tracker in it, and a soccer ball that had a tracker in it. And if you go outside and kick that soccer ball around, you're going to get X amount of points, and you can plug your code into the world, and that gives you the chance to go buy new avatar clothes or this or that.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was a great idea. That was my friend Steve, was one of the co-founders who had the idea, and the toy product at that time, because we're talking about 10 years ago, it was a real hard row to hoe to get that electronic interface to work, take a pounding, be able to kick it around, and like a kid would kick a soccer ball and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
But we got both. The Frisbee and the soccer ball were the first 2 that we had that were working models, and they worked. The batteries weren't lasting as long as they should have been. All those little technical glitches, which weren't my responsibility. My job is to come up with the decals that are going to look cool on a soccer ball.
Yeah.
But it was an excellent aspect of the entire project that I thought was actually meaningful, because all of us were parents and all of us had kids playing, sports. I coached 2 soccer teams, so I like that aspect of it a lot, because it was telling kids, get the hell away from the computer for a while.
Right, go outside and play.
Go outside and play, you little pain in the ass, and go. I like that. It's just that Apple just killed us. So
wow.
Let me announce my 3rd novel, John. It's going to be everybody at Apple gets killed. Mysteriously, they all die.
Whatever it takes, man. Cathartic. Absolutely, man. No, as Nerdette says, use the pain as a catalyst. Definitely. So very good. I like it. That's funny. She also wondered for your novel if you crowdfunded. I'm obviously assuming no, you didn't need to, because you had a publisher. You were like, it was. I'm too old and too stupid to know enough about the crowdfunding stuff. This is a manuscript that I wrote with no knowledge at all if it would be sold. It was a spec manuscript in essence, but my experience awards me opportunities to make contacts. So the work I was doing with Starlight Runner is what got me introduced to the agent, and the agent was interested in the book idea. It wasn't even finished at that point. When I first met Albert, I was still doing my rewrites to Claire's edits. So we're talking about spring of 2019. And he said, I'll take a look at it when it's done. And that's kind of all you need. When it comes to the book publishing, it's so hard. You need an agent. And if I didn't have an agent, I don't think I would have sold it. Literally, I just wouldn't have, because they're the ones who open the doors. They're the ones who build up the hype. They're the ones who get people curious because they've heard UTA is representing this. So the co-creator of Deadpool helped a lot in that capacity, but it wouldn't have 5 years ago. It helped a lot in that capacity, because the people doing the buying now are familiar with the character.
as a success more so than they may be familiar with the character as a narrative entity. They understand that 2 movies made over $1 billion and it's done billions of dollars in merchandise sales. So that goes, okay, we can market that, you know, so it helped a lot. But that same exact hook wouldn't have helped, maybe not 5 years ago, but it wouldn't have helped as much 10 years ago, you know?
No,
that's why I said some of it's a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm of opportunity for me that just kind of ended up clicking right.
We're near the same age, and I bet you remember in the 80s when Chris Claremont left comics and was trying to publish his first novels and stuff. And
he published it at Berkeley. He published it at Berkeley Publishing.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And it's how we met his wife, Beth, who I worked with.
Crazy.
Her name then was Beth Fleischer, and I worked with her. And I think she was either Chris's editor or she was definitely a science fiction editor at the time that Chris sold that novel. I think what's it called? Windsong? I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, or I was thinking of First Flight or something.
First Flight was that one. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. It was First Flight.
No, it's all good. Yeah. Please.
That was a long time ago. Yeah,
exactly. It was a long time ago. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So I get it.
And it just goes to show you though that a lot of people a lot of guys in their 30s, 40s, they really don't understand the work and the slog that it's been to get comic books and comic book characters and comic book creative personnel to be elevated in the eyes of not just the audience, but the general audience, but in the eyes of those who do the buying for other platforms, the movie guys, the TV guys, the book publishing guys. You know, Chris Claremont was the single most successful writer that Marvel had for over a 10-15 year span. He sold 100 million or more X-Men comics, right? And you know, he writing a novel had to have been a bit of a chore for him to get the sale, to get the attention, to get the opportunity, because the comics were just looked down on. And it started to shift in the mid to late 80s, but I started at Marvel in 85, and you know this, John, we still had another 10 years of having to fight the sock bam pow headline, you know, comics aren't just for kids anymore, you know, we had to endure that constantly, you know. I
agree, man. And you know, I started Word Balloon when Sin City and like Batman Begins. I started at the end of, first I was going to do a documentary about like key comics, and I talked to Azzarello and Max Collins and people like that, and knowing that, you know, again, and really focusing on crime comics and not so much superhero stuff. And then, like, you know, obviously, whatever happened in the last 16 years has just been tremendous and a big leap forward. And God, I mean, I know obviously the success of Deadpool, you're right, as a brand is amazing. I mean, I'm sure you never thought there would be, like, especially the way you guys created Deadpool, that you were looking at toys. And I mean, yeah, there's the nerd toys, but like literally that, like, little kids have Deadpool banks that are, you know, shaped like a figure, and the craziness of that. Yeah.
Rob's character design is really strong from a visual standpoint, and we may not have thought that it could be on backpacks in 1992, but there was nothing about the visual that told you it couldn't be on backpacks at some point, you know, because it's so clean and pure and strong and bold that it manifests itself really easily on merchandise, more so than some of this other stuff that gets done nowadays, which is absurdly intricate in its design and layered, and artists are killing themselves now on stupid monthly comics. They can't draw monthly comics anymore because the amount of detail they got to put into everything is ludicrous, you know. And Rob really nailed on that Spider-Man look that was clean and pure, and it's not a surprise that it works really well on merchandising, you know. It just took a while for it to seed into the public consciousness, but it started with kids, honestly, more than anything. It started with teenagers, and it started with YouTube and social media and cosplayers pranking at conventions, and their videos going from 40,000 views in 2009 or 10 to 4 million views a year or two later. I watched that. We were tracking that. I'm working with Riley Brown on Cable and Deadpool, from 2004 to 2008, and toward the end of the run, it was when some of those cosplayer videos were just starting on YouTube, and we laughed and we go, "Holy crap! He's got 42,000 views. That's like 5,000 more copies than we're selling." What the and that same video 3 years later had like 4 million views, and then 30 million views. So you knew that was happening even before the movie came out, and it was. So it's not anything you expect, but if you understand how these characters can transcend the comic book page into the mainstream, as Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Spider-Man did and Hulk did, then it's not a surprise if it happens, because they're tailor-made to have that kind of impact on a cultural landscape when the timing is right and when the character is right, Yeah,
but also, as William Friedkin always said, to make a great movie, 1,000 things have to go right. And did you have a chance to ever, in pre-production, talk to, and I'm forgetting Tim's last name, the director of the first one?
Tim Miller. No.
Tim Miller, yeah.
I had no involvement or engagement at all before the first movie. I was offered an opportunity to read the script, but I didn't even want to do that. Because if I'm not writing it, if I'm not directing it, if I'm not acting in it, if I have no involvement in it, just because it's a character I co-created and I've written, so what? Like, they're going to do their job and they're going to do it good or bad. And they did it well. So I was glad about that. That's for sure.
Sure.
I was a little more engaged in some of the prep work for the second movie, just in terms of the guys asking me some questions about the variety of characters they were going to be bringing in, and fans' expectations for what the character should be like and who should interact most strongly with who. But it was just email back and forths. But my attitude is that there comes a point where it's paid consultation work. So there comes a point where if enough notes have been written, it's time to send a check. And they know that too. They're very smart about that in Hollywood. So right before you get to that point, that's when they go, "Okay, thanks a lot. We're good. Bye. See ya."
So you didn't get money? Did you get money or you didn't get money?
No, not for writing or pre-production work or anything like that. No, we have long-standing deals. We have long-standing deals with Marvel, not with Fox, and not even technically with Marvel Studios. We have a long-standing new character agreement with Marvel, that we get something when something gets done, and we get something on an accumulated basis. Every one of these is a different deal. Everybody has a different deal.
Yes.
They're all NDAs, and they don't let you talk about it. We're not even supposed to be allowed to talk to each other about it. So how the hell are we ever going to unionize or not? I get more for Deadpool, luckily, than other people who came before me got for what they did, and quite frankly, than other people who came after me get for what they did. We just happened to be in this window at that time where these things were being looked at and discussed and negotiated between the company and the freelancers, and that because it was a signed document, that carried through into the future, into Disney's purchase of Marvel. So they've been consistent about keeping up with it.
That's fantastic, man. No, and like you said, not a lot of people can say that. Certainly the generations before you.
Oh,
and
for
that's
sure,
interesting. The one and in the post world as well. And again, it's very interesting, honestly, as an observer, casually, as a fan growing up when we did, and even now paying a bit more attention because of what I do. No, it's honestly, I think it's fascinating, and I hope that creators are properly compensated. Moving forward.
You know what to me, it's more shame on the companies, the two big companies, because although to different levels, they have tried in the past to improve things, because it's a company and a corporate structure. It would never get to where it should have been, so that both sides can feel good about it. So as a result, though, they are the ones now luckily, laughingly, who are bearing the burden of that because they're watching the most interesting ideas and the most interesting material and the most interesting creators being published elsewhere,
Right.
So and then the shame of it is, though, unfortunately, I don't even know how much the characters, the companies even care that much at this point, because their fodder is not made from the publishing revenue. Their bucket is getting filled by the licensing, merchandising, and movie entertainment revenue, and that's okay too. That's all right,
Sure. Sure,
but just don't be surprised if we don't create new stuff for you. Don't be surprised if we don't give you, an idea we think is a killer idea.
Yeah.
Could Sweet Tooth have been published at Marvel? I don't see any real reason why you couldn't have found a way to publish Sweet Tooth at Marvel if you had Killraven at Marvel too. You know what I mean? It's just an alternate future story world, but
Sure.
Jeff Lemire smartly is never going to publish, Sweet Tooth for Marvel. So the minute you see a year or two from now, when you start seeing little 5-year-old kids walking around with antlers on their heads because they bought the Sweet Tooth hats, the companies are going to go, crap. If I were Marvel or DC, I would have said 10, 15 years ago, we can't let that Walking Dead money leave our doors ever again. That's what I would have said 10, 15 years ago, and I would have fought tooth and nail and probably been fired in 5 minutes to try to prevent that from happening, and the only way to prevent that from happening is incentivizing the creators to create, and making sure that they get paid for that.
Yes,
but
it's well, and I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm still very entertained by the current crop of writers and what they're putting out there, and it's so it hasn't reached that level of indifference, at least from a fan standpoint, for myself. And it's interesting, some of the new people that they get, like Chris Cantwell coming from TV. And God, Dr. Doom and Iron Man, those are fantastic. They were great new ideas and stuff. Donny Cates obviously doing a great job. A lot of I'm a big Matt Rosenberg fan. Aaron's been doing a great job for the last 10 years or so. It's really interesting. Again, forgive me for naming men, everybody that's watching or listening, but it's a really good. Hey, Kelly Thompson, great writer.
They got both. I haven't read as much DC. New 52 destroyed me. I haven't read much DC in the last 10 years. Although I've read some, and what I've read when I've read it has been good. And I'm really late on everything because I read everything digitally now. So I'm reading trades digitally years after they've come out. So if I'm reading something now, I just read a Nick Spencer Spider-Man, but I think it came out like a year and a half ago.
Sure.
So and I think part of it's my age and part of it's the amount of content I've consumed. I think that I'm on the other side of having enthusiasm or interest for that. I can read it and see that it's well done, or but I don't get that chill. I don't get that rush.
Yeah.
I get that rush if I read a 50-year-old comic in a Marvel Masterworks because I remember when I bought it when I was 12 years old.
Sure.
That's the rush I get now. But I got to be honest with you, and I'm going to mispronounce his name because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. James Tynion.
Tynion.
Tynion. Okay, I just read the first Department of Truth trade paperback, and to me that had more energy and more spark and more life to it than his Batman work did. Not even his recent stuff because I haven't read that, but the older stuff.
Really good.
And that was good too. So, but this was a different beast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tom. And I almost feel that way about my novel too. I having finished it, it's a different beast. It's a different beast than what I do when I'm writing Juggernaut miniseries or when I'm writing whatever. Yeah. And I think that the reason for that is I discovered at the age of 58, 59 that there's a real pleasure to doing something that is yours.
Absolutely. And again, listen, man, it's just a number, and that. I mean, and really, I'll name drop right now, but Rick Remender, Mark Schultz, and I were at a convention, and this is when I was like 48 or so. So a few years ago, and Mark was just going through. I really want to make this. I really want to make that, and I want to do it before I can't do it. And Remender to reassure Mark, it's like, oh, hey, you're not old. And it's like, no. What Mark is saying is, and I understood because we're both older than Rick, it's like, no, we just know the clock's running. So what do you want to do before you really can't do it? Like, you can still do it. I can still do what I want to do creatively, but it's like, don't waste time. Like, really try to have a game plan and get things done before you truly can't do it anymore. When you are in your 80s or whatever, so that's great.
I figure I'm good until 70, and then my brain will just explode. That's my body will be fine, but my brain will explode. But it's more the whole ageism thing. It's ageism is actually more what you just said. Trying to get things done before you won't be able to get it done with the same level of skill or alacrity or confidence. Ageism, I've learned, having gone through the ups and down waves, ageism only exists when you're not getting the work you think you should be getting or want to get, but when you're getting work, ageism doesn't exist anymore because you're getting work.
Sure.
So, 5 years ago, I might have grumbled internally, never externally, I've aged out. The editors are 34 years old. They weren't even born when I was writing X-Force, and then they read it and then they're just told it's a joke now, blah, blah, blah. So you think there's ageism there, but it's really not. It's just a matter of you got to do something that sparks their attention. If you're
awareness.
DC.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you got to do something that's outside of the wheelhouse. I always tried to do comic book work for the majors that was outside of my wheelhouse, in their minds outside of my wheelhouse, not outside of mine. Even back in the early 90s, I was pitching stuff left and right that was outside of the main norm, and here I am, 60, having a book published that is a pregnant 34-year-old FBI profiler is your lead character, for crying out loud,
That's awesome.
But the irony that I always bring up to try to make the editor understand is that I had this idea in 1995, okay? It's not like I aged into the idea. Maybe I aged into the skill and the experience to do it better, but the idea was from when I was just about ready to quit X-Men. So, you can't. What happens too much in our industry is that we pigeonhole creative talent. We've done it forever. They're that kind of an artist, or they're that kind of a writer, and that's the harder thing to break out of. Not the age aspect of it. The harder thing to break out of, in my opinion, is the genre aspect of what people think you are within the medium as a whole. So in some ways, for me, this being a mystery thriller getting reviewed positively on Kirkus and Publishers Weekly is more of a validation that the stuff I wanted to do back in the 90s. And John, you're great getting that book cover up there. I really appreciate it.
No. I want people to know. And
I'm working on getting a convention display that's the book cover, so I can just prop it up behind me at every interview I do.
I want to know. I'm
going to walk around the street with the display in my hands.
You need the sandwich signs, like the old man.
Sandwich board. I need a sandwich board with the Suburban Dicks on it.
Absolutely, man.
That to me is validation. The book sale and the genre it's in is validation that I wasn't wrong 30 years ago. That me wanting to do an Archie Love and Rocket style book set in the Marvel Universe was the right idea. That me wanting to do a Western, which I had to fight forever to get done, which was a Two Gun Kid miniseries, that the editor, that Tom DeFalco, it was the fastest sale I ever made in my career. I told Tom about it in the hallway, and he goes, "Done, we're doing it, it's great." And it was sales that didn't want to do it for years, who kept putting the kibosh on it by giving it numbers that weren't going to justify doing it. Even when I'm writing 3 of Marvel's top 10 books, we're struggling to try to get them to agree to do Two Gun Kid.
Wow. Who was your? Did you ultimately get the miniseries made? Forgive me.
Yeah, but unfortunately, yes, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh, okay.
It was a disappointment, partially on my own end, because they scheduled it at a time when I had way too much work to do, and I couldn't focus on it the way I needed it to.
I wonder if I want to ask you about one book in particular that I loved of yours that didn't last long, and I wonder if it was part of this period as well. Your Hawkeye book. I loved your Hawkeye book.
Oh, that was post. Yeah, that's later. I appreciate that. Thank you. I
absolutely, man.
Hawkeye was such an interesting book. They asked me to do it based on the fact that they liked how I had used the character in Thunderbolts, and I love Hawkeye. He's one of my top 3 characters growing up. Avengers was always my book when I was a kid, and Hawkeye was always the coolest thing in Avengers. When he quit and it took forever for him to come back during the Avengers Defenders War, I was really frustrated because he was gone for so long. And then Giant Size X-Men #2 came out with that Dave Cockrum splash page of Hawkeye swinging through the city, and I learned what love was. This was amazing. So they asked me to do the Hawkeye book, and I said, great, I love Hawkeye. But more his downtime, not when he's with the Avengers or with Thunderbolts. I was like, okay, and not in costume. And I'm like, not in costume. My brain, I'm still at a point where my brain doesn't quite understand that, and it was the Gemis era, so it was the height of the Gemis era, where a solid 4-part story turns into an unsolid 6-part story. Where decompression starts to really hurt your storytelling and your pacing, and you can't do a 1-issue story. You can't do a 2-part story. Everything has to be 6 issues for trade, and that really hurt the book initially to the point where it only lasted 8 issues. Not that anything, when you look at it, most books only last 12 issues or less since the early aughts, right?
Yes,
But it wasn't selling well, and its reception was mixed because Hawkeye fans who wanted to buy that book were not buying it for Clint Barton goes to Myrtle Beach and sits in a hot tub with a bunch of kooky people. They're buying it to see Hawkeye. And no, look, I love writing the scenes where Clint is in a hot tub bouncing ideas off of tourists sitting in a hot tub, but at some point I firmly understand that you need to get him in the damn costume shooting some damn arrows, and to me, my last 2 issues, 7 and 8, were what I wanted it to be. It had the same feeling, the same tone, but it was more of a Marvel Universe set story. It was him and Black Widow and a murder and a crime and blah, blah, blah. And it was told in 2 issues, which was the best way to tell that story. I don't think Hawkeye as a character is one who works as well over prolonged story stretches. I agree. So 3-part, 4-part stories, that's kind of the max you should be dragging out of a situation with him in it, because his nature is not one to indulge patience. So at some point, he's going to run right into that problem faster than he should. So expecting that to take 6 issues is unrealistic to the character,
I respect that.
So it was frustrating. I appreciate it because I loved writing that book, and I actually, my mind clicked a little this way when I wrote that book. It started to turn me into a slightly different direction. Less exposition driven, less caption and less continuity driven, and you throw continuity in there, but you kind of can slide over it through dialogue and not worry so much about how anally retentive it is, because they weren't. So I had to learn, if Marvel's not caring that much about that stuff, then why the hell as a writer should you overly care about that stuff? Who
was your editor for that series? Was it Panicia?
No, it was not. Holy crap, I'm forgetting who my editor was.
I know, it was a long time ago. Forgive me.
Was it? It might have been Tom. It might have been Tom, just because Tom was doing Thunderbolts at the time.
Okay, wow.
So it might have been Tom.
What I liked about it being Clint out of the uniform, it kind of was his version of Steve Rogers going out on the motorcycle and traveling around. Yeah. But Clint being a very different character. Yeah, different results, obviously, and different expectations. And I just did. I liked him thinking back to his carnival days with Swordsman and everything, and that kind of initial mentorship. And that's the thing. No, I think you really went deep into Clint Barton in a very different way. I mean, I loved what Fraction and David Ajah did later. But
I think Joe Quesada really had a vision for the book, I think, and I was close to that vision, but I wasn't good enough to get to the vision he wanted. Fraction was,
Okay.
And I think Fraction captured the vision that they had in their mind for that character in that book. If I still had to write the book today, I wouldn't write it too differently than I did back then. I would not, because Fraction's book is similar in intent to what I did, but different in terms of its approach and execution. And better, admittedly better. And that's good. That's cool. There's no problem. Fraction couldn't write New Warriors to save his life, so it all works out just fine. But I respected the living hell out of Fraction's run. And because when I read it, I go, oh, that's what Joe wanted, and I couldn't quite get there. I get it now. But he didn't have Fraction could tell 2-issue stories and 3-issue stories and even self-contained stories. I didn't have that opportunity. I understand. The Gemus mandate was the Gemus mandate. Stretch that sucker out until the rubber band snaps. That's what we had to do,
No, and decompression isn't for everybody, both character and writer. I like this comment by Stephen Commander. Thank you so much for Vance Astros becoming Justice. Your New Warriors stories got me through some really tough times growing up. How about that?
Thank you, Steve. Steve and I are always talking on social media. So
that's nice. There you go.
He's just giving me some props, but he's already told me that in the past. I appreciate it.
No, that's cool. I'm with you. He pops in on Word Balloon interviews, so I'm glad he's here today. Daniel Feast says, is there a bit more freedom attached to doing Suburban Dicks as opposed to writing for pre-existing characters? Can't wait to read it.
I appreciate you giving the book a shot. And yes, there is tremendously more freedom in writing prose of characters you created than writing in a shared universe, company-owned IP. Ultimately, though, working for Image is working on stuff you own, and for the most part can do a lot of what you want to do. But now that a publisher buys it, though, that changes the dynamic slightly. I can't hand in a manuscript that breaks the mold in a negative way, disrespects the characters I created just because I feel like it, and expect that they'll comfortably go, yes, we'll pay you for the book, So that changes the dynamic a little bit once a publisher decides to buy it, understandably, because they're putting their money up to do this thing. So you have some responsibilities to them and to that as well.
Moving forward, I guess I know that you do have some sort of Marvel project in the works, but how do you see balancing writing moving forward? Are you gonna,
I wrote for both? I wrote the second book through the pandemic. I was really lucky in that I had a book contracted to write before the pandemic hit, so I had my job to do. But in that time period, I tweaked and finished up Juggernaut stuff. I worked on the first half of Outrage Season 2, which is a digital comic on Webtoon, which unfortunately is on hiatus right now. But Season 1, all of Season 1 and half of Season 2 can be read for free on Webtoon. Download the app because it's got a tremendous amount of cool content on it. And it's the de facto go-to source for digital comics globally now.
Is Riley your artist on Outrage?
We're co-creators of Outrage.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, because Riley's a friend and he's been on and has told me about this. And also, of course, we talked about your Cable and Deadpool stuff as well. Yeah, so your Infinite Comics and,
Yeah, we're on hiatus now. We shouldn't be, but we are. It's frustrating, but it's reality. And hopefully we'll get back to it and finish the second season soon. I was asked. I did the X-Men Legends issues, so I did 3 issues of that. Two have come out already. One is being drawn now. It's a self-contained issue. I've done an animation Bible in that time period.
Wonderful.
I'm doing another franchise Bible now.
Wonderful.
So I'm juggling. I still juggle without a third book contract on my lap. I'm still doing whatever work comes my way that interests me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I am in a really lucky good place in that I've been able to turn down some offers for things that normally I might have said yes to, just because college tuition had to get paid, but college tuition doesn't have to get paid anymore because the kids are done. So, so now literally I can say no sometimes now, which was always something I was afraid to do in my career. And I say no to some things, and I feel good about saying no because I don't think I would have done a good enough job, right? So, don't do it, because I've done more than enough half-ass work in my career. I don't need to do that much more.
Bob, you're reading my mind, man. I mean, no, in my broadcast career, I've had those kinds of situations present themselves, and it's like, I don't want to half-ass this. I don't know if I should take this, whatever. Thank God the podcast is working out and people are supporting it, both sponsors and viewership and listenership. So that's all good.
I just got to a point where if I don't want to do it half-assed, I'd rather do it full-assed. So I'd rather something be a flaming disaster, because that's kind of fun, or really good. Either one.
Sure.
I don't want to be as much in the middle anymore. My entire career has been in the middle. I want to either just go all the way off the cliff. I mean NFL Super Pro on steroids, or Suburban Dicks and getting a starred review from Kirkus. One or the other.
Did you write NFL Super Pro, by the way?
I did not create NFL Super Pro, but I wrote the original special and the first 4 issues of the comic. Under duress, when your boss and your boss's boss both tell you that they'd like you to do something, you kind of have to do something,
Sure.
So
that was part of New Universe, right?
No. You're thinking of Kickers Inc.
I was thinking of Kickers Incorporated. Yes, indeed.
Which you may be the only person on the planet who just now was thinking of Kickers Inc. So probably NFL Super Pro was a licensing deal between Marvel and the NFL, and they'd been struggling for a few months to get the property to a place where both sides were happy with it. So NFL kind of said, we want a top writer on this, licensors, what the hell do they know? And so they asked me, because I was writing X-Men at that time, they asked me, can you do this? And I'm like, no, I got doing 5 books, 4 books a month right now, and I got a full-time job. And then Tom DeFalco and Mike Hobson both said, you can do this. And I was like, sure, I'd love to do. So Bob Budiansky was the editor, and he dropped a stack of paperwork on my lap, which was all the stuff that had been going back and forth, the notes, the problems. And my job was to try to figure out a 48-page special out of that.
Wow.
And I did. And it was dumb, but it sold really, really well. Remember they used to be called bookshelf editions at Marvel back then. It was the Dark Knight format.
I was going to say the Dark Knight format.
We couldn't call it the Dark Knight format because we were Marvel. So we came up with bookshelf edition.
Square-bound graphic novels. Yes.
Yep, the bookshelf editions. It sold over 40,000 copies at back then, like a $4.95 price point. So it was and then because it did so well, they go, we're going to do a monthly series now. And Fabian, you're going to write it. And I was like, no, I am not. That's not happening. Wow. And they said, all right, can you give us a few issues at least to get the ball rolling? I said, all right, fine. So I wrote the first 4 issues, but it was goofy. Jose Delbo is the artist, and he's a wonderful, sweet man. But what he knows about football, a cicada knows about football. Yeah. So he really wasn't the right choice for the art on the book. So it was one of those really strange, goofy projects. But the good news, though, John, is that Bob Budiansky, the editor, Tom DeFalco, Mike Hobson, and several other Marvel higher-up personnel got an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl that year in Atlanta. Except I didn't get an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl.
Oh, that sucks, man. Yeah, absolutely. That's lousy.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I got the royalty check, so it all worked out.
All right, there you attaboy. That's awesome. All right,
you gotta weigh it. If they had said, would you rather have the royalty check or the trip to the Super Bowl, I would have taken the royalty checks.
I totally respect that.
You shouldn't respect it, but you should understand it.
Dude, I was gonna say I worked in sports for a long time. I understand. Never went to the Super Bowl. Would much rather get paid. I got news for you. Steve Commander says, did sales warrant a Juggernaut sequel? Also, he's got Suburban Dicks ordered on Amazon, and he says it's thanks to my sign. So that's good. I'm assuming that's because we're putting that up, and we've got that it comes out on June 22nd. So
right,
that's
Steve,
awesome.
I am thrilled that you pre-ordered it based on John's sign, but since you follow me on Facebook, and for the love of God, I've posted the link to pre-order about 7,000 times in the last year. Son of a Juggernaut sales were very solid. I don't ask for numbers, and they don't give you numbers anymore, it seems, which is odd to me, but they don't. Unless you got to ask. Maybe if I asked, they would give them to me, but I usually don't care. The first issue was in the top 20 for Marvel, so it did okay. I don't know if it warrants enough for them to do another comic book miniseries, but there have been discussions on other things that we can do with the character, and there's a possibility that might be the Marvel job I've been working on that John had mentioned earlier.
That's wonderful.
But it hasn't been announced. It won't be announced because it's part of a larger program. But I have written the script for a story that may or may not involve the Juggernaut.
Very good. That's great to hear, man. A friend of mine who's a massive Nightwing fan at DC has said, he's like, ask him about doing Nightwing because apparently you've won it. Yeah, that's interesting.
If he knows now, Dick Grayson has been my favorite character in superhero comics since I was 6-7 years old, because when I first came to this country, the Batman TV show was one of the first things we saw. And I could never be Batman because he was an adult, but I thought I could be Robin. So automatically Robin became my favorite character.
Sure.
And I followed him on and off all through the early 70s when he had some of his solo stuff. Gil Kane was drawn, and Detective and stuff.
Hudson College, absolutely, man.
Yep. And then when Marvin George started Teen Titans, I was immediately on board.
Sure.
I have loved the character, and I still love the character. Until Dan Jurgens took over Nightwing recently when he was Rick Grayson, until Dan did that, I think I had been the only person in comics who has had a chance to write him as Robin, as Batman, as Nightwing, and as Rick Grayson, which isn't much to really be proud of, the Rick Grayson part, but it is what it is.
They kind of stuck that status quo. I mean, no, in fact.
Well, I got lassoed into that one.
Yeah. Well, you weren't alone. I mean, I know, Ben Percy. I was just talking to Ben. And,
Ben I don't know what happened there with Ben, but we were kind of.
Yeah,
it was an emergency, sort of a rush job. And Lobdell was going to plot it, and he asked me if I would script it, and my initial response was no. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that, because I'm not confident that Dick Grayson's going to be respected through the course of the storyline. I got no problem with the idea of the storyline, because I think monthly comics is sausage churning. You got to come up with fun, interesting new ingredients for the sausage. That's all. There's nothing wrong with a good sausage, damn it. It's just sometimes you get bored of the same old sausage, right? And no different than removing Wolverine's adamantium gave Larry Hama 75 issues of Wolverine to explore him in a very different way. Okay, good or bad, positives, ups or downs, whatever. That's the monthly cycle of publishing. And
Absolutely.
Larry got 75 issues out of that, right? There's no reason you couldn't have gotten 25, 50, 100 good issues of Rick Grayson. It all would have depended on the quality of work that the company wanted out of the book. And I didn't have confidence that DC's editorial regime would have the same level of interest and respect for the character that I had. So my initial response was, no, you're out of your mind. I remember I was at a convention in Philadelphia when Scott called me, and I had gone to the bathroom, and I was on my way back to my table when he called. So I was telling him no as I'm walking back to my table. I'm like, I can't talk, Scott. I got people waiting for me in my booth. So I ended up doing it because I was worried that I thought at the very least through script I might be able to keep some respect for Dick Grayson there. And I quit after my first issue, but I ended up scripting 6. But after my first issue, I quit because I was like, this is a disaster. I just don't want to do it. Marie is in charge of DC now. So anything I talk about DC is not about its current regime. My issues with DC's editorial regime date back to New 52, and it didn't change much at all for several years.
So were you writing during New 52? What were you writing?
Well, I was writing Red Robin when we got canceled so that New 52 could relaunch itself.
Yes.
That in and of itself was incredibly annoying and frustrating, especially because Tim Drake wasn't going to get his own monthly book. He was going to be in Teen Titans. And they asked me to write Legion Lost. And
sure.
I quit after 3 issues. I quit after 3 issues, and Brian Cunningham, the editor, asked me to please stay on through issue 6 so that we could at least get a trade paperback, because they'd already fired like 1 or 2 writers after 1 issue. So if I quit after 3 issues, it wasn't going to look good. I was like, this is a disaster. It was just a disaster, John. It's 10 years ago. I don't even care. It was just an editorial disaster.
It's cool. And honestly, go ahead.
And if you had told me when I was 12 years old that you're going to get to write a book with Wildfire and Dawnstar and Timberwolf, those were my favorite Legionnaires. And Dave Cockrum and Mike Grell era was when I got into Legion. So I only really took the book with any level of enthusiasm because the characters who were in it. But you give them a list of, these are the 5 things I want to do with this book. They give you an idea of what they see as the reason for the book's existence. This is the hole that it kind of fills in the overall universe. Okay, and here's the 5 things I want that I think are going to make that hole really work. Fill in that hole with good stuff. And they go, yes, 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 and then you don't get to do any of them. So by the time you're writing your scripts, no, we can't do that because this is happening over here, or no, we can't do that because they changed their mind about that over there. You're like, forget about it. It's life's way too short for that kind of crap.
I hear you, man. No, and that's a familiar refrain regarding the New 52 era in a lot of ways, and also regarding Nightwing. And again, I point to my friends that are much more into the character than I am. I like Dick Grayson a lot, and I grew up with him too. I know what you mean. I'm only a couple years younger than you, man. But that said, I know that a lot of times what happens in the Nightwing book is dependent on what's happening in the Bat books, and it can't be its own character, and that's a great frustration to our generation, and also I think people slightly younger than us that grew up with that same wish fulfillment that was realized where, hey, yeah, Dick Grayson was the boy wonder. Well, now he's a grown-up, and now he's his own hero. And I know the Nightwing fans are like, and let him be his own hero in his own book and not have to always fall back in, well, we're in this Bat event, so let's put a pause on your story to make it fit. Yeah.
It's part and parcel of the event crossover within a family of titles dilemma, which is understandable because it also always perks your sales up for a few issues. So it helps you amortize any budgetary losses that other issues might be sustaining, But the other side of the problem that is afflicted, in my mind, the Bat family is multiple generations of writers and readers who have, for the most part, created an infallible character. And Batman always has to be right, can do no wrong, has prepared for every single contingency on the planet Earth and beyond.
And in space and in time,
And I just even, on Facebook, I even just joked with somebody about this a couple days ago, where they were saying Batman would have planned and prepared for this months in advance. And I just responded, my Batman was hit from behind by a guy wearing a cat hat with a striped shirt and knocked unconscious. So sorry, I don't agree with that, because on TV you'd be watching Adam West get beat up by some guy in a little cat hat,
Absolutely, man. That's funny. Literally,
and I think it really what ends up happening then is you diminish the other ancillary characters within that family grouping because the main character is so here that the other characters are never able to reach those lofty heights, as it were. So you have to keep making that character so great, and you often do that by diminishing the decisions and the choices and the things that the secondary characters like Tim Drake and Jason Todd and Dick Grayson do. So I'm not being paid to be Batman editor, so I don't care.
I'm with you, man. No, it's all good.
But I got to write 2 issues of Nightwing. I got to write 2 issues of Nightwing with Don Kramer before New 52.
Oh, that's great.
And
I love Don.
It was like
Don's
a career.
great guy.
It was like a career happiness for me to get to do that.
That's awesome. Panther God says Red Robin was a magnificent book. Tim Drake became a high-end strategist. Very cool.
Thank you.
He also asked, how do you approach large cast dynamics in teens? How do you approach that?
I have always looked at it from back in my first book was a teen book. It was Sci-Force, a New Universe book.
So wow, sure.
I didn't have much training ground outside of that. My first book had to juggle multiple, and I inherited it at a point where the decision was being made that they were going to be forced apart. So I followed through on that, and it enabled me to learn really early how to try to manage my page count, because that is an absolute part of monthly comic publishing, is that you have a strict page count requirement, and you gotta work to that. You don't have the luxury of this issue is going to be 30 pages, you know, because this scene needs to be longer, you know.
What was the page count per issue back then?
Back then it was 22.
Okay, it was still 22.
Now it's even harder because now it's 20.
Now it's 20, exactly. Yeah, I wasn't sure because, like, again, you and I growing up, when we did in the 70s, you'd have things like the 100-page. Well, you know, but the in 60s and 70s, you'd have the 100-page spectacular. You would have like a 16-page new lead story, or 18, whatever the page count was. I know it was less than 22, obviously.
Well, but all through the late 70s, the page count was 17 pages.
There you go. Yes.
Which you read a Marvel Masterworks, read a 17-page story. You don't want to talk about having to truncate your story, you know. Sometimes resolutions happen in one panel that should have taken 4 pages to resolve. And guess what? In a 22-page comic book, it would have taken 4 pages.
Sure.
The page count had fluctuated a little bit right before I started at Marvel, but by the time I was there, we were pretty steady at 22. And sometimes if you bump the letters page, you can go to 23 pages. But you kind of had to get the okay to do that.
Sure.
And it taught me how to juggle multiple characters within the context of my page space. And maybe working on Sci-Force was a really good first experience for me, because by the time I got to New Warriors, it honestly wasn't something I had to think that much about. I planned the book out for almost 2 full years before we even really got going on the first few issues. I already had a rough 25-issue outline in my head. I'd only shown the editor like 6 or 8 of those issues just to get the ball rolling. Because you also don't want to tie yourself in with an editor. You don't want to give them too much information because they may not like it, or too much information that by the time you get there, they don't feel enthused about it because they've known about it for so long. So you gotta juggle the psychology of that too.
Certainly.
But rotating, what I did with the first year in New Warriors, if you look at it, is I'm rotating who the story is about. And in a couple issues, it's about more than one character, but oftentimes the story has a point of view focus from one of the characters, and that is your opportunity to nail that character's growth or characterization or what their advancement needs to be. And you use that to try to get your secondary characters in that story to learn something about themselves or about the lead character of that story in order to move the relationships forward a little bit more. So it's a bit of a whack-a-mole game in a way, but you have to keep your point of view moving throughout the various characters you have in the book. And I didn't do it great because I didn't give enough attention to Firestar, who was in New Warriors. You know, a lot of the first year New Warriors was doing Nova and Night Thrasher stuff, because one had to be really introduced smartly to the audience because he was a new character. The other one had to be reintroduced to a new audience in a way that didn't wholly alienate his old audience, but kept interest in a new audience who didn't know who he was from the 70s, you know. So you just move it around. You just move it around slowly, issue to issue to issue. And it's different nowadays, though, whoever's asking the question, because you may not get 12 issues to do your team introspection. I wrote, when I started writing New Warriors, I was under the full impression that this book was going to last 2-3 years minimum. Even if it didn't sell that great, I knew I'd still get a second year because it wasn't going to sell so badly that Marvel would cancel it in the first year. Not back then, and so knowing you have 36 issues or so, minimum 25, really changes the way you can think about moving your pieces on the chessboard. You don't get that luxury nowadays. 6 issues, maybe 12, and
right.
And as a result, we've lost subplots in monthly comic books. We've lost soap opera in monthly comic books. We've lost the slow burn in monthly comic books. It's actually really disappointing from a reading standpoint, because the trade reading experience is not the same as the original monthly purchasing experience I had as a reader when I was a kid.
I hear you, man. I totally hear you. Panther God has a good question here. What is your approach to politicos and social messaging in comics? Consider the current social justice
anti-SJW.
I'm doing this for the audio audience as much as the video audience. So the current anti-Southern social justice warrior backlash. New Warriors was very progressive, as was your X-Men and Magneto arcs. So any thoughts on politics and social
Panther
messaging?
God, you may not like my answer. I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap what an audience's perception of the story is. I didn't back then that much either, to tell you the truth. I do what I think is right for the characters. And if you look at New Warriors, you had an African-American lead character. That automatically dictates some of the things that you're going to do with the book. You have an Atlantean hybrid young woman. That automatically dictates some of the choices you have to make with the book. You had 2 mutants. That automatically dictate. So I'm not doing stuff with any conscious thought that I'm trying to be progressive. First of all, it's my natural inclination anyway. I came to this country in the late 60s during the height of the Vietnam War, and I grew up in a kitchen where my mother would say that goddamn Richard Nixon, in Spanish, by the way, which always sounded much more fun. So I came of age during Watergate, and that just cemented my perceptions about a lot of things when I was younger. And I am an immigrant to this country, so I have my own very small, admittedly, understanding of the slights that we have to endure. I didn't have to deal with it as much because I was Americanized and schooled here, but my name was always funny by the standards of anyone I grew up with in New Jersey, and I had to watch store owners' faces cringing when my parents were trying to talk to them and ask for something because of their heavy accent. So I grew up with a little bit of an understanding of all of that stuff. And it made me realize that I'm going to tell stories about people who are going to have conflict. Sometimes those conflicts are going to be because of the differences in their backgrounds or their cultural identities. Other times it's going to be because they both have valid positions and they disagree. It's all going to ebb and flow and go back and forth, But I do it within the context of the characters. And if you're talking about New Warriors, then there was one of my early issues was a 2-part story with a character introduced called Star Thief, who was his family was killed because a satellite screwed up and he got laser blasted or something, and that gave him powers. I don't even remember at this point, but he wanted to stop all space travel. And he was blowing up rockets on their launch pads in China and United States, whatever. And someone wrote a letter in and said, you must really hate space travel because Star Thief's, reason for doing what he wanted to do was so strong and valid. And I thought, that's interesting. I am 1,000% in favor of space travel and have been my whole life. And I think one of the greatest sins this country ever undertook was the abandonment of its space program in the late 70s, and then
Totally agree.
almost a complete abandonment after the Challenger explosion.
That's
so
right.
I strongly, wholly disagreed with Starkey's point of view, but I agreed that he had that point of
course.
view. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I don't. The whole progressive thing to me is just good fiction. People of different backgrounds with different cultures, different experiences, and different views of the world make for easier writing, because you can have more character conflict and character interplay as a result of those differences between them. And
Agreed.
if the characters are learning something during the process, chances are pretty good the audience might be learning something during the process. And if what they're learning is, don't be so damn white, that's not a bad thing. That's not the worst thing in the world to learn. You know,
I'm with you.
So
I'm totally
sorry,
with you.
guys. Sorry if
that was
you're
a great
damn
answer.
white out there. I can't.
No, that's
it. Is what it is.
Conflict. Brings story. I mean, that's really that basic thing. And Stephen Commander, by the way, is shocked that you know who he is from social media.
Yes.
So that's very nice. There you go. You're connecting with your people, Fabian. That's awesome.
I don't know what some people. How can you not remember a name, Steve Commander? It's like the greatest frickin'. It's Major Matt Mason. It's the greatest damn space age name on the planet. Steve
You are
Commander.
man. I'm only like 4 years younger than you. I loved Major Matt Mason.
Major
And in
Matt
fact,
Mason.
I'm sure you watched on Netflix The Toys That Made Us.
Yeah.
I've had Brian Volk Weiss, the creator of the show, and I'm like, give us a Major Matt Mason story. He's like, John, I got to tell you, it's not that interesting of a story. I'm like, okay.
It isn't. On Hasbro's end, it's not interesting. Next time, talk to him about Outer Spacemen, which were the bendables that were created of alien characters.
Oh, yes.
Because Major Matt Mason was not creating that. So they created bendable figures just like Major Matt Mason that Matt Mason could finally interact with. And
Absolutely.
they were the coolest, goofiest looking aliens ever. So,
honestly, I
want.
Go ahead.
I want Steve to maybe join the Air Force so that he can rise in ranks and one day he could be commander. That's what I really want out of life.
No, man, I don't know if you read this, but I remember about 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, that they're like, Tom Hanks wants to make a Major Matt Mason movie. I'm like, yes, please. Good Lord, yes. Yeah.
It would have been cool. Yeah. The problem is Major Matt Mason didn't do anything. He had
but he had all the equipment.
Conflict.
You're right. You're as a character, I completely
agree. He didn't have
agree.
alien women. You're thinking of Kirk.
Right. No, you're absolutely right about that. But again, I was a very lucky kid. My father was like, you like Matt Mason? Great. Here's the moon base. Here's the moon crawler. All the great toys and everything.
They had all that. They were great visuals, but the moon rover couldn't, like, it collected rocks. That's all it did.
I know.
It didn't run up against like an alien rover.
No.
It didn't.
No, it was based in realism. It was all the NASA original. Like, there's that Life magazine from the early '60s that has all these conceptual ideas for equipment for the astronauts and stuff. And I always thought it was Mattel. Maybe it was Hasbro, but it was like
no. You're right. It
was
Major
Mattel.
Matt Mason was Mattel. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and they just kind of took all the concepts and made toys out of them. And it's like, again, you and I grew up with the original Apollo missions and everything, and it's like, oh my, that's why, like, I love Star Trek, because as a child, I'm like, well, in 300 years, space travel might, who's to say that it'll get more comfortable and they won't have to wear the space suits in the capsule and everything. So I was like, hey, this could really happen. And, sadly, we've grown up to learn otherwise. And now it's the dark,
They did it to us. We didn't do it. They did it to us. They crushed it for us. Honestly, John, I think a lot about where we would be as a society and a planet if we had tripled down on the space program in the 70s and worked with other countries to go to Mars, and we would have gotten to Mars by the 90s, let's say. How different could our entire planet be if we had pushed harder to make it a global effort to do this?
Are you watching on Apple TV For All Mankind?
I watched the first season. I decided I cannot subscribe to every single TV service on the planet. So unfortunately, Apple also has the the really good show with what's his name, Jason Sudeikis, whatever his name is. The coach
Ted
show.
Lasso, the
Ted Lasso,
soccer
yeah,
show.
which is supposed to be really, really good.
It really is.
And I
It
heard
really is.
I heard the second season of For All Mankind was excellent.
That's why I was going to say. Yeah,
I watched the
definitely
first season.
Buy the second season when you can.
Okay, yeah, I want to watch it.
It
They
was
said
great.
that they really push it. They really push the envelope a lot, which is really cool.
Oh no, and I mean, and yeah, everything that you had wished for happens. I mean, it's obvious. Ron Moore, the showrunner and stuff, is clearly a massive fan of what could have been. And
but isn't it infuriating that
yes,
you have to do it as speculative fiction? Like,
yes,
it's not our actual history. We have to write it as speculative fiction.
Everything everything they're planning. In fact, literally, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine this afternoon. It's like, to get to Mars, you got to build a moon base, build a ship there, and then go to Mars. And it's like we were on path to do that until they stopped funding. And it's like, this is the wish fulfillment of if the NASA program hadn't stopped when it had. And it's going to be interesting seeing they always just project ahead, and you really get the 80s in season 2, which is great. Cool. And it sounds like the 90s are going to be the next decade. So no, it's really well done. And it really is like, God, why didn't we go this route? It's fascinating.
Now here's the interesting part of the whole twist though, John. Pretty much a lot of that money that would have gone toward funding that kind of an endeavor ended up being diverted toward greater tax breaks for corporations and the like. And here we are 30 years later, where corporations now have these ghastly amounts of money where they can start exploring space. Isn't that wonderful? That we decided not to do it ourselves as a government, but we gave the money to people who 20, 30 years later have enough now that they can say, let's start a space program.
I know, Bezos is going up in space in the next month or so.
It's just it's mind-bogglingly. It's mind-bogglingly stupid. But
did you like Ad Astra, the Brad Pitt movie?
No, I did not. Yeah, I did. No, I didn't like it.
Oh, that's all right, man. No, you're not alone. It's so funny. And a lot of writers like yourself that I respect, it's like, it's kind of boring. I'm like, I thought it was intense myself, but that's cool.
I didn't like it. It didn't come together for me. It really didn't.
That's cool. That's cool.
It had some really good visuals and some interesting ideas, but as with many Brad Pitt movies, it did not have an aspirational hero I could root for. So as a result, he becomes sort of this blank on screen of internal moping, and I just give me Chris Evans Captain America any day of the week.
There I'm with you. I am absolutely with you.
Same character template. One is proactively aspirational, and the other one just
that's awesome.
Inner whining.
What I liked about Ad Astra was that it was kind of the anti 2001, also how mundane traveling to the moon became in that future. And that literally looks like an airport. You got the DHL store, you got a Subway franchise, and you're on the moon, and it's like that could be Cleveland as much as it could be the moon.
That's exactly what it would have turned into, and maybe one day will turn into. We're not gonna reach the moon and change who we are as a species.
Of course not.
It's not gonna happen overnight. You're still gonna have a Starbucks on the moon, and it's still gonna have a long line, and people are still gonna be complaining about the crappy coffee, and you're still gonna get something on your Twitter going, "We apologize for our Moonbase 17 station. we will work really hard to make sure they get better."
You're right, man. That's awesome.
Thank you, Starbucks.
Great conversation, Fabian. I really enjoyed talking to you, and seriously, I'm so sorry it took so long for us to get together. And
I'm glad we did, John.
Yeah, man. No, genuine pleasure. Suburban Dicks out June 22nd. Sounds really cool. It's going to be the beginning of at least 2 books, and hopefully a continuing series for Fabian Nicieza. And we'll be watching for your Marvel announcement and see what that's all about. But dude, come back. We got a hell of a lot more to talk about.
Maybe Marvel will one day announce this thing. It seems to take them forever to announce stuff. Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely, man. No, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. It's going to be a busy week at Word Balloon, and it's one of the reasons why Fabian and I are talking on Sunday. I'm talking to Mark Waid on Monday, Howard Chaykin on Tuesday. It's going to be a fun week. So I hope you'll join me here on Word Balloon Live.
Tell Mark and Howard I said hello.
I absolutely will, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. I want to make sure some comments. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Leandro. That's very kind. I appreciate that. Well, it's all Fabian, man. I'm here every week.
Just tell Mark and Howard that they have to try to top one of your best episodes ever.
Absolutely,
okay?
man. No, they're in. Absolutely. That's true. Everybody, thanks a lot.